Well, I'm delighted to be here today in the original home of the renowned designer Tibor Reich in Stratford-upon-Avon with Tibor's grandson, Sam Reich, who is taking on the design archive that Tibor bequeathed to the family. And today we're going to look at some of this extensive archive, learn a little bit about what inspired the designer Tibor, something about his background, your family history, Sam, and what your plans are for the future of this great brand. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, and what is going on here in Tibor's home that he designed for your family, for your father and his family, and how you are reviving the brand?
Well, I came into this project about 2 years ago when I finished university, studied at Bristol, studied history, nothing to do with textiles or design, but gave me a very good understanding of how to understand archives. Being the sort of ever entrepreneur, I had this very small business university and was always looking for the next opportunity. And so when I finished, this was a great, fantastic opportunity, and obviously something that's very close to my heart. So we were initially faced with this fantastic archive of over about 20,000 designs, and the real task over the last couple of years was to decide a strategy of how to launch the company and how to understand the archive and how to understand where the value is in the archive and what best to do with it. So over the last year I've sort of been archiving every single piece, listing, cataloguing, going through and making sure that I understand every single aspect over 30 years, and working with consultants really to try and develop a clear strategy and where to launch.
For those who don't know so much about the Tibor range, I mean, clearly your grandfather Tibor worked in many fabrics, in ceramics, worked with many design mediums.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through, because we've got a sample here of some of the
Yeah,
fabrics,
well,
can you talk us through some of the highlights of this
yeah.
collection?
Well, just before the highlights, I mean, he came over from Budapest in the 1930s.
Yes.
We're from a family of textile industrialists, and he trained as a textile designer in Leeds University from about 1936 to 44. After finishing university, he worked for a year in a factory in Manchester and decided it was too sort of repressive, and the conditions just after the war in 1944 were pretty terrible. So he decided to set up his own mill, and he found a beautiful old mill in Stratford-upon-Avon, which incidentally is nowhere near the textile hub of Manchester or Yorkshire. And he started by initially doing woven textiles, but throughout the 30 years that he was in business, from about 1946 to 76, he did ranges of woven textiles, printed textiles, ceramics, plastics, tiles, carpets, rugs, and the brand very much became about sort of lifestyle and very much about the Tibor lifestyle, which is evidenced in his house, which was designed as a sort of show house to sort of show all his ideas to the general public of the 1950s and 60s. So I don't know if
you're reviving again.
Which I'm reviving again. Yeah, very much about this lifestyle, which is on the one hand based on moving the brand forward, but on the other hand looking back to this period of the 1950s in particular, where we have the birth of British modernism. Britain had just sort of come out of the war, rationing had just finished, and we were building this new welfare state, and we have the sort of the creation of the home. And Tibor was one of the designers, with a few other designers, who really implemented this idea of modernity, obviously looking back from his Hungarian roots and bringing sort of Bauhaus and modernism, and then trying to reinterpret in a sort of a British fashion.
Bringing a British lifestyle and future glimpse, I think, because he was inspired very much by nature, but
very
also
much so, yeah.
some of the scientific developments.
Yeah.
And I think if you can talk to us a little bit
Yeah,
now,
sure.
show us some of the highlights.
Yeah, sure.
In
I'm
here.
just going to, probably the first textile that is significant actually is if we go over here.
Right.
This is one of his first major commissions. He just set up Clifford Mill in Stratford in 1945. He'd taken a very, very small loan on. He wasn't even allowed to be employed by his own company because he's a Hungarian national. And he was asked by the Wool Board to present a textile which they were going to present to the Queen for her wedding present when she was marrying Prince Philip in 1946. So he quickly designed this little very simple weave which uses a sort of a wool loop yarn.
Oh, yes.
And the textile was sent down to London, and the Queen had a selection of 20 textiles from the leading manufacturers, and she chose this textile, which is fantastic, and we have a beautiful letter here from the Queen saying how pleased she was with the beautiful wool furnishing fabrics.
Yes.
And so by then, although the company wasn't wasn't making a huge amount of money, it had a huge amount of publicity, and he was already starting to become a name to be reckoned with. And from then, from about 1946, 1950, business was okay, but the first major break really comes in 1951,
Yes.
and where Tibor designed this textile here, which was called Cymbeline. And in 1951, we have the Festival of Britain.
Oh, yes.
And in this book here, there's the designs for the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. So for Stratford-upon-Avon, as part of their celebrations, they commissioned Tibor to do, I think it's 400 metres worth of drapes for the theatre.
Right.
And he got a huge amount of press again. And
yes.
the idea of the textile was, whilst the brand was called Tibor, the idea was that it was very much deep textures. And the textures and the colour were very much inspired by the beauty of nature, the Cotswolds, William Morris, and that sort of idea.
Yes.
And from then on, really, the woven textiles just started to develop. The
relationship stayed with the RSC then, didn't it?
The relationship stayed with the RSC, and very much with the Shakespeare Centre as well, and Stratford. And over 30 years, Tibor very much worked on using Shakespeare as a sort of ally and a good publicity and promotion for sort of developing ranges. And often a lot of the fabrics were named after Shakespearean characters, Cymbeline and all those sort of different Prosper and all those different characters.
Yes.
But then, as the 1950s develops, another very important piece is this piece here, History of Shapes,
beautiful.
Which was for the Queen's coronation.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
And it was developed with ICI, the big British British government company, and it's woven in a fabric called Ardle, which was made out of ground peanuts and was supposed to be developed as a cotton substitute, but it never really took off because obviously it was very expensive to produce using cotton substitutes. But the idea of this piece is it has 4 shields. It's called History of Shapes, and it traces the history of Britain from the early days of the Magna Carta and the Elizabethan age of the discoveries down to the Victorian age of the Chippendale chair, the Industrial Revolution, and then to the modern age of 1953, which is the Vulcan and the light bulb and the postage stamp. So very much it shows this bridge between, on the one hand, British tradition, but then on the other hand, British modernity, and the sort of the very unusual link that can be made, and sort of juxtaposition.
These weaves are very dense, and the fabric is a thick fabric. I suppose, putting it simply, is that a trademark of the Tibor range? Very much so. I mean, when Tibor designed, the first port of call was always quality, and that's something that we start with. In the modern day 21st century, is that quality has always got to be the most important factor in any design. So the quality of wool, the amount of wool in a design, and quality for us is about longevity and about something being able to last. Yes. On the one hand, it's fantastic that these fabrics last for 20 or 30 years or 40 years. We have many chairs downstairs that the fabric's been on there forever. On the other hand, it's sometimes not good for business because if it lasts that long, we're very proud on this idea of really going back to the basics and making sure that everything is produced in Britain and using the finest sources for everything. Exactly. Now we talked about designs here that were linking traditional with modernity at the time. Tibor, your grandfather, was inspired by nature, but also by science. And so you were showing me earlier an example of the first images of the atom. So one of Tibor's trademark ideas was to use photographs and to transpose the pattern into a textile weave. So in mid-1950s, he managed to get an image of an atom, and he used this image and transposed it onto woven design. And he called the name Colotomic, which is colour and atomic for atom. Right. And likewise, it came in printed designs. So you get these in sort of black and blue. Yeah.
And interestingly, whilst on the one hand it's interesting because it's a design of an atom, the printed textile range came in 16 different colourways.
Right.
And the idea was that for the housewife or house husband was that they'd have all their curtains on their curtain rails, and depending on their mood, they would change colours. So he'd want you to buy 5 or 6, which was very good for business, and then you would change all the different colours of the curtain rails, and they all sort of blended in together. So sort of this idea of blending fabrics together and schemes and contrasts, which was, you know,
quite
we take for granted now, but it was very new for the period.
Very new at the time. And then also I think he pioneered the idea of using photography and translating the images taken in photography into design. Can you show us a few examples of that?
So, for example, this piece here, which won the first ever Council Industrial Design Award, which is called Flamingo, uses a photograph of a straw, and he took the segment of the straw photograph and transposed onto fabric, and obviously these days we take this for granted, you know, with Photoshop, and but for the period it was completely avant-garde, and you get other interesting designs like this, which is using a segment of a stone wall, and transposing it. And again, as ever, they come in woven textile design as well. So this is some rockery plant, which was then turned into a weave, and was really, you know, very avant-garde for the period. And I can show you. He would sort of experiment with photographic sources, and hold on.
And Sam, these look very contemporary today.
Very contemporary,
and, even in fashion.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how design can be timeless or fashionable, and how we can really judge, those of us maybe not so familiar with designed items, what makes a great design then? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's quite a hard question, and I don't want to be the person to say what makes a great design. I mean, I'm obviously the person running the business. I understand the design. I think what my grandfather and very much the designers of the Bauhaus would say is that designs should be timeless, and they shouldn't necessarily cliche or age with dates. So very much our rationale is that we want to be introducing designs into the market that aren't dated. I mean, we have a lot of designs from the 1960s which are beautiful, and op art and pop art and so forth, but we really want to make sure that every single design stands up in today's market.
Give us an example of the 60s then, so we can see how something can be very much of its time, and maybe not so timeless.
For example, I mean, this is very much 1960s, and you know, very similar to the Pucci. Beautiful colours, and obviously a very, very gorgeous design. But say, for example, if we launch this into the market today in the interiors, maybe more on the fashion side, you could probably get away with it. But for interiors, this is very much of a period you wouldn't have a house these days with a psychedelic. Well, you might do, but
some people might.
Some people might. But for example, this design here, which was used on the QE2 ocean liner. And won a Cotton Ball Design Award, which is very much based on op art.
Oh, that's really fantastic.
Very, very beautiful again.
That's fantastic.
And as a beautiful art, and it could be used as a beautiful rug. But as curtaining fabrics these days, we try and stay away from that. What we would do instead is very much go back towards the 1940s, where we have all these beautiful designs,
these are amazing,
which are really gorgeous. And in classic Tibor fashion, we have a whole box of these. We have about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds over one, you know, which he did actually in 1 year, using a sort of a magic marker pen that he invented in the 1940s.
Really, these are
very,
quite
very
amazing.
beautiful.
So we have a whole variety and array. I mean, there's enough here, really. I think
for business alone.
Exactly, for one business alone. So these are quite extraordinary, and as somebody who takes a great interest in these designs, I think there's much in here I can safely say that our house would be delighted to host.
This is what a lot of them end up as printed chiffons from the 1940s.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Or likewise, printed scarves. These are from the early 1940s. And this is what actually I was doing as a student, just to sort of get by these printed designs. But they're very, very,
absolutely fantastic.
very, very beautiful.
They're really fantastic.
The colours are very, very rich and vibrant, and a
Yes.
lot of them unfortunately been moth-eaten. But
Oh dear. Oh, well, so what are your priorities now in reviving the business?
Yeah.
Where are you going to be based? You're obviously going to have a showroom here in Stratford
Yeah.
again, which
Yeah.
is really exciting
yeah,
for,
it's fantastic.
for us all. And what are you going to prioritise? Because there's such a huge archive here. You could go in many directions.
Yeah, very much so. And one thing we've been working with is our consultant interior designer who knows the market back to front. And we're very
Yes.
much going back to the roots of the company, where Tibor made his name, and that's the very deep woven, heavy textured cloths.
Yes.
We'll be doing a range of 10 woven designs and 2 printed designs.
Interesting.
And it's important for a young company. I mean, we've just gone through a round of investment, but it's important to be realistic about how many products you can do, what is economically
Yes.
viable, and
Yes.
and so forth, because you don't want to be going in too many directions, because you won't go in either direction properly.
Yeah.
So we'll be doing that initially, and then we might be reintroducing some of the ceramics range. He did a beautiful pottery range
Yes.
of black and white pottery,
Yes. Yes.
and
There's-
taking it from there, really.
Well, that's a lot actually of that you have
Yeah,
planned just
yeah.
in there alone. In fact, I did just want to show an image, if we can find it in here,
I've actually- yeah, I can show.
of the ceramics, because I thought they were also extraordinary looking, very distinctive,
Very
as,
much so,
as is
yeah.
obviously a trademark of the Tibor range. Was it in here?
No, those was.
No, that's
I
the
think-
wrong
I think-
book, is
I
it?
think, it's quite.
It's
Hold on.
deep,
It's
deep underneath here. Well, maybe while we're looking for that, I could ask you,
Here it is.
obviously you have a massive archive
Yeah.
of existing designs that your very prolific grandfather designed in his time.
Yeah.
But what are your plans for new design? Because we have a huge range of design talent today as
Very
well.
much so. Well, the idea of the brand is not just to merely sort of go onto the shelves and pick out a design and go, we're going to reproduce this one, because
Yes.
that's not what the company's about. The company's about, on the one hand, launching with Tibor's designs, but very much
Yes.
using them as a nucleus for
Yes.
further collections, and using his ideas, because that's
Yes.
what design is very much about. So we will be, in the year 2, employing new young designers to create, fantastic new designs.
Yes.
Very much probably more from the fashion-led approach.
Right.
And we very much believe that the best designers are artists who become designers, as opposed to designers who become artists.
Oh, right.
Because it gives that sort of inbred creativity that is needed in design, and that's very much what Tibor, he always called himself an artist who
Yes.
understood the parameters of design.
That's very interesting.
So that's
Yes.
very much the approach of the company, and then
Yes.
from there onwards we'll be hopefully developing abroad, and we've got a big exhibition, 2 big exhibitions next year, and a book.
Oh, really?
and
Where are the exhibitions?
the exhibitions are in London and in Manchester.
What time? When are they being held?
Manchester is January to May 2016, and then
Oh, right.
London May to September, and then in April this year we've got a small exhibition at Birmingham City University, where the archive is going, which will be fantastic.
That's yes.
So we're very pleased that we can
That's-
re-establish links with
Yes.
Birmingham and that sort of local
So
region.
Your grandfather employed in his business at its height, was it around 70 people?
Yeah, around about 70 to
70
100 people on and off.
His business was a working business over how many years? Was it about
1946 to 76 is when the mill closed, but even when the mill closed, he was still doing consultancy, sort of colour consultancy, and lots of artwork for different companies. But for 30 years was when the mill was running and was sort of the height of British industry.
Yes.
And obviously from 1975 onwards, a lot of industry moves abroad and
Yes.
off to China and the Far
Far
East
East.
and that sort of region. And interestingly, industry from there is now coming back to Britain as manufacturers realise, in a quest for sort of different products that aren't just all mass produced, that Britain is very good for being able to produce something that's quite unique, and you can really have a good control over the production
Yes.
and manufacture.
So these archives, this asset here,
Yeah,
is enabling you to create the base of the revived business.
very much so,
and,
yeah.
Obviously drawing on our design talents, the creativity.
Yeah.
But we will hope to see a great new revival
Yeah.
moving forward, and clearly an opportunity for young people to build their own careers
Yeah.
and their own futures, and for this to branch out in many directions again, as your grandfather had done, whether it's the textile side
Yeah.
or carpets, tiles,
Yeah.
and so forth, and many partnerships can be possible
Very much so, very much so. I mean, the industry works to different, different parts of design industries work in different ways. I mean, there's the licensing model and then there's the direct sales model. But, over the years, and especially with the massive international possibilities of being able to partner internationally, partner with different sales agencies, partner with different designers, doing different licenses, is very much how the business needs to work to sort of grow forward and move into the 21st century, and that's very much my plan.
And do you see the British legacy? I mean, obviously your grandfather came over to Britain from Hungary, but do you see the British design legacy as adding value to that as your business, as you seek to grow your business? Yeah,
very much so. I mean, the designs by themselves stand up as beautiful designs. I mean, all the interior designers and so forth we show them to understand that, they say they're absolutely fantastic and beautiful, but I think importantly any brand has to understand that if it has such a fantastic heritage like us, designing for the Queen and Concorde and the Q2 and all those sorts of fantastic projects, you've got to be using your heritage to try and grow the brand, because it's a fantastic way of bringing people into the brand. Partly in the consumer contract market, and also the consumer market. People love the beautiful story and love that the brand is associated with such a rich history of British design, which is so unique in a way. It blends this idea of European modernity with British sort of tradition and countryness and being close to nature. And we have a very rich design heritage, especially from the mid 20th century of British modernism, that I think needs to be recognised and is certainly having a revival. Yeah, recognised and promoted. And, every region's got something different, that some different contribution that it made. And obviously the primary textile contribution is, Manchester was the main region, but this is a fantastic example of a textile company that was set up in Stratford-upon-Avon, of all places, to set up a textile company. It shows that with the right attitude and the right level of entrepreneurship and sensible planning, that anything is possible, as long as you really go for it with the right enthusiasm, I hope.
I'm sure that's the case. Well, Sam, thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Pleasure.
Sharing some of this amazing archive collection, of which we've really just
only scratched the surface.
Scratched the surface.
Yeah.
And but I wish you every success.
Thank you very much.
And I look forward to being able to see you perhaps in a year, and to hear
and
look back exactly on your achievements over that year.
Great.
So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.